The Alps, from Slovenia to Switzerland, a journey across Europe's most prominent mountain range. Switzerland lies at the heart of the Alps. In the Swiss National Park, the behaviour of the Alpine Ibex is studied. Here people test their sporting abilities or simply come to relax. Near Lake Maggiore, a cook reinterprets traditional recipes. The route begins in the Engadine Valley and leads to the southern side of the Alps into sun-kissed Ticino. After stopping off in the glacial world of central Switzerland, the journey ends on Lake Zurich. The Alps are the roof of Europe. In the mountains of Engadine, close to the Italian and Austrian borders, lies one of the most beautiful and imposing ice fields of the Swiss Alps, Morterach Glacier. It begins at Piz Bernina at an altitude of 4,000 meters and ends only 2,000 meters lower near the Bernina Pass. With its rugged ice shell and its 6-kilometer-long tongue, it resembles a mythical creature. A labyrinth of ice with dangerous crevasses and impenetrable caves, it's the epitome of alpine grandeur. But it is also an example of the vulnerability of the Alps. Since the start of systematic study in 1878, the glacier has receded by 2.2 kilometers due to global warming. Engadine is also home to a species of wild goat, the Alpine Ibex. Its image features on the cantonal coat of arms of Graubünden. The large-horned mammal is a hardy animal, and the sparse grassland above the tree line are enough for it to survive. Up to 20 animals live together in a herd. The human belief in the medicinal properties of their horns was the ibex undoing. By 1650, the animals had practically vanished from the Alps. Thanks to the resettlement measures, some 300 ibex once again roam the Swiss National Park in the canton of Graubünden. It was established in 1914 and is the only national park in Switzerland. Here Serena Campbell-Andry works as a game biologist.
My father is a hunter. As I accompanied him from a young age, the animals have always fascinated me. Their distribution, their behavior, how the herd is set up. If you grow up in Engadine, you automatically come into contact with the animals.
When temperatures rise, the animals retreat to the more refreshing higher regions. That makes it more difficult for Serena to locate them. the biologist monitors their numbers. The young already lock horns and fight playfully. Practice for more serious wrestling matches to come when the males are older. Ibex share their habitat in the national park with red deer and chamois. Serena wants to examine how many ibex the alpine wilderness can support. She works together with the park rangers.
If you want to study the ibex, then you have to be aware that it requires venturing into steep terrain. The animals can only be found in steep mountain regions. And you must also never forget that they are wild animals, and you can never predict how they might behave.
In a deep circular valley at an altitude of some 2,000 meters, the park rangers have laid a trap. They had to wait for 4 days before an animal walked inside. The ibex couldn't resist the salt bait. Salt is essential for the animal's survival and rare in the high mountain reaches. After the animal has been sedated, Serena and the rangers have 40 minutes to examine it.
What we do first after giving them the narcotic is blindfold them. As soon as they can't see anymore, the ibex calm down. You can tell by their pulse, and you can feel that the animals submit to the examination.
By looking at the horns, Serena can determine that the ibex is 6 years old.
These blood samples will have to be sent in for centrifugation, but we'll also do a swab test. Then we can examine if the animal has been sick and what diseases there are. From all of these samples, we retain a serum. That way we can keep a DNA sample of the animal.
The genetic fingerprints help the rangers to gather information about relations in the population. By using tags, they can trace the movements of the animals and discover where their summer and wintering grounds are. The sedative slowly starts to wear off. That means only a few minutes left for the scientists. In the Swiss National Park, the ibex have no natural predators and hunting them is prohibited. The numbers are regulated by the harsh winters. Zernetz, the gateway to the Swiss National Park, lies on the threshold between Upper and Lower Engadin. From here, the aerial route continues. The Dreiländerspitze, a 3,000-metre-high mountain in the Silvretta range, marks the border between the Swiss canton of Graubünden and the Austrian states of Tyrol and Vorarlberg. It also serves as an important climatic and water divide. At the foot of the mountains lies the Inntal Valley. It's long been one of the most important traffic routes through the Alps, and has always been both border and transit country. Over the centuries, Lower Engadin became a bone of contention between Austria and Switzerland. Numerous castles attest to its turbulent history, as for example the almost 1,000-year-old castle of Tarasp. Until 1803, Tarasp was under the sovereignty of Austria. Here, one of the few remaining Swiss dwarf schools still exists. Children from the 1st to the 6th grade are taught by 2 teachers. One of them is Aglaia Galman-Josti.
I think it's important that the children can walk to class, and when they can go to school in their own village, and don't have to be taken to different places 4 times a day. Like this, your roots remain in the village, and it's an important addition to the social life.
Aglaia Galman-Josti has been teaching in Tarasp for 19 years.
Our school is very small. This year we have 16 pupils. I teach from year 4 to year 6, but I also give some classes in years 1 to 3, so it's quite varied. I'm not just bound to one class.
The pupils live scattered over 10 districts. The lessons are taught through the medium of 2 languages, German and Vallader, one of the 5 Rheto-Romance languages.
Buondì Nedo, buondì Frederik, buondì Juri. Also ich möchte ihnen eigentlich vermitteln, dass sie gerne zur Schule
I want them to enjoy coming to school, respect each other, and have compassion for others.
Dass sie einander respektieren, dass sie sich nicht streiten.
I try to teach them not to argue, to listen to each other and interact.
Auch zuzugehen. Wirklich so, ja, die zwischenmenschliche Basis auch. Klasse quasi imprenden a ler e a scrivere numbers fina. È difficile. Sì.
Vallader is only spoken by about 5,000 people in Graubünden.
E cinci adudes, qual è finge avanti? Fna. Es schafft Identität, also
it creates identity. That's why we're fighting for our language, because we have the same rights to teaching materials in our language as German-speaking and Italian-speaking children do.
Oder wie italienischsprachige Kinder.
Learning how to do fractions in the mountain school is very different from elsewhere. Break-time snacks serve as teaching aids.
Sono portin un petit con cinci.
Fini. 30 minutes of exercise, in addition to sports lessons, are also on the curriculum in Tarasp. There are only 5 dwarf schools left in the canton of Graubünden. Their teacher is optimistic about the future of the school in Tarasp. Not only Swiss children enroll, but also the children of immigrants from Portugal, Germany and Croatia. On the north side of the Inntal Valley is the neighbouring village Chingle. Here the inhabitants have formed a cooperative to sell their natural produce. One of them is mountain beer.
The special thing about it is the fact that we cultivate the brewing barley up here in the mountains. The farmer's field must be at an altitude of over 1,000 meters. Due to the climatic conditions there, the grain ripens late in the year, but it stays ripe until late in the summer.
Marc-Florian Geyer came here from Germany 7 years ago. Now he's the master brewer of Chingle.
I think that the combination of the barley with other resources, like the high-quality alpine spring water that is used for brewing, constitutes the special, delicate taste of Schleen beer. That's what makes it unique. What I particularly like about the small brewery is not only that we adhere to specific guidelines, but also that I can develop new varieties by combining new resources.
70,000 litres of beer are bottled every year. The brewery is the only buyer of the local mountain barley. It was established in an old farmhouse. The qualified brewer and maltster attends to each step of the production. The fresh malt is ground in a roller mill.
I can really make a product here. From the basic ingredients to the moment when I can first taste the beer, when I give tours and drink Schleen beer with people. I'm there from start to finish.
Schleen beer has gained cult status in St Moritz. Marc-Florian uses the classical brewing method, where the beer is left to ferment for 4 to 5 weeks.
It has a cloudy yeast. Proteins are added as they add to the tastes and make the beer fuller-bodied and very drinkable. In the past, I've brewed beer with fresh ginger, and every winter I produce a stout called Doppelbock that's brewed with mountain honey. In the summer months, I've added bergamot twice before, and that gives the beer a fresh, fruity character.
Under the umbrella brand Boon Schleen, Good Things from Schleen, the village not only sells beer, but also mountain cheese, dried meat, jams and liqueur. The journey leads into the western part of the canton, to Youth. Along the way lies Piz Bernina, the highest mountain of the Eastern Alps. The Bernina Express is a technological masterpiece. The 100-year-old train line is an industrial monument, as well as a World Cultural Heritage Site. It travels through Graubünden all year round with freight and passenger trains. On its 150-kilometre-long route, it overcomes numerous obstacles, passes and gorges, glaciers and torrents, mountains and narrow passages, before finally ascending the 2,300-metre-high Bernina Pass. In the foothills of the Bernina Massif lies Lake Sils, that became a home from home for Friedrich Nietzsche. He identified with the countryside and spent several summers here. At Lake Sils, the second part of his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, was created. From Lake Sils, Vallader leads into one of the remotest areas in the Graubünden region, Avers Valley, with a mode of transport that's as emblematic of Switzerland as the mountain railway, the post bus. At the wheel is Dorli Menn.
I actually prefer driving the bus to my own private car, because in that I'm sitting almost down on the ground and can't see anything. In the bus there's a much better view, and you can judge situations better.
Dorli Menn was born in Youth. At 2,100 metres, it's the highest village in Europe with permanent residents. A dramatic mountain road leads up to it. 24 people live in Youth. It's for them in particular that the post bus is in operation.
I became a bus driver for a very simple reason. When I was 35, I had had enough of working in an office. So then I thought, driving a bus sounds like a dream job.
More than 2,000 post buses provide a lifeline for the remotest valleys in Switzerland. In 1984, Dorli Menn was the first woman in the country to drive one of the cross-country buses. Dorli Menn has travelled a lot, professionally but also on holiday. However, she's always remained faithful to her home village. In Youth, she converted her family's former cowshed into a home. In the summer, it's an idyllic place. In winter, life becomes a struggle.
If we are unlucky, then winter can last from the beginning of September until May or June. And I could imagine that that would be difficult for people who didn't grow up here. For me personally, the solitude up here makes Youth so special. And I of course love the close connection to nature. You really can recharge your batteries here, and I don't mind that it's so quiet.
The mountain roads along which Dorli Menn drives her bus are some of the highest in Switzerland. One of the oldest routes in the region is San Bernardino Pass, which connects Graubünden and Ticino. This was already an important route across the Alps in Roman times. From Youth, the route traverses Hinterrhein Valley up to San Bernardino Mountain and drops down the southern regions to Lake Maggiore. Bellinzona, the second largest city in Ticino, welcomes visitors with a series of castles that once guarded the main route along the Alpine passes towards the south. Just before it flows into Lake Maggiore, Versasca River is dammed by a 200-metre-high wall. The particularly brave plunge themselves into the depths below. Glamorous spa and holiday resorts like Morcoti shape the face of the region around Lake Lugano. It was once an important transfer site for goods on the route between Ticino and northern Italy. As early as the 1920s, Lake Maggiore drew artists and philosophers here. In the 60s, the jet set arrived. On its northern bank lie Lugano and Ascona. Along the Lungo Lago, the lake promenade of Ascona, Ivo Adam runs a restaurant. He is a passionate angler.
You have to go back to the roots, recognize and respect the origin of a product or a living creature. Bearing that in mind, you can prepare a good meal with it.
At almost 200 meters above sea level, Lake Maggiore is the lowest point in Switzerland. Ticino River, which gave its name to the canton, flows through it. To this day, the fish industry is an important source of income.
Most of the products I use are regional. You have to think of it like a film, like a detective story. You always need a main character and 2 or 3 supporting roles. And that's how I create dishes from the region with the region.
Ivo Adam adds new ingredients to traditional recipes to reinterpret Ticino's dishes in his own special way.
Ascona, the Monte Verita, is a very powerful place. And when I think of new creations once a month, I take some time off and do a bit of sport out in the fresh air. I need that to wind down and re-energize, to be creative.
The German-born cook is multiple world champion and head chef at the 7 restaurant.
I'm a minimalist perfectionist. That means that patience is the name of the game.
Polenta
is very typical for Ticino. You take sweet corn, let it dry, grind it, and then it's cooked. It was originally a poor man's dish. I always try to retain the original form. That's the cob of the corn. There are many things you can do with it. You can get it dried, ground, as powder, or in liquid form. So there are many ways of using sweet corn to make polenta. I combine traditional methods to make something new.
His menus are an unconventional encounter between the Swiss and the Italian cuisine.
I believe that you can only put 100% into a meal if you have the right surroundings and team. From my restaurant on Lake Maggiore, there is a wonderful view of the water and palm trees. What could be more beautiful?
The journey continues, winding around from Ticino into the Hinterrhein Valley, past Switzerland's three most famous peaks, Eiger, Mönch and Jungfrau. This is where the romantic image of Switzerland as an Alpine Arcadia was created in the 19th century. It's the birthplace of mountain tourism, where affluent travellers come from England, Germany and France. A rare view from this perspective, the north face of Mount Eiger. With a length of up to 4 kilometers, the climbing route across the mountain face is one of the longest and most challenging in the Alps. The threat from rockfalls and avalanches is high. The 1,650-meter high north face was first climbed in 1938. In an exposed position on the northeastern ridge is Mittellegi Hut, for many climbers a vital base on the mountain. On the southern side of Jungfraujoch, several smaller glacial fields unite to form the longest glacier in the Alps, with 23 kilometers in length. From the observatory, there's a view deep down into the valley filled by the glacier. The 80-year-old observatory and weather station is a technological monument. It lies at an altitude of 3,570 meters and is the highest permanently manned station in Europe. From the air, the prominent pyramid shape of the 4,100-meter high Mönch is visible. For passionate mountaineers, it's one to be added to the list. The most frequently walked route leads across the eastern ridge. Over to the east, towards Gotthard and Valbergallia, the mountains gradually become lower. Perpetual ice makes way for cultivated alpine landscape, with pastures, mountain farms and larger villages in the valleys. Cattle farming forms the basis of the existence for most mountain dwellers, as here on Alp Nocera. The name means place where the bears live. In the valley, an old tradition is still preserved, playing the tiba. With this wind instrument, the shepherds used to communicate over long distances. Marcel Bass is one of the few who still master the craft of constructing the tiba.
The tiba ist eigentlich ein Signal.
The tiba is actually more of a signal device than an instrument. Before there were telephones here, the shepherds would arrange with farmers that if they played a certain melody in the evening or at midday, then they had to come up the mountain, as it was an emergency call.
Wenn wir was spielen, dann müsste ich hochkommen, dann ist was passiert.
Marcel Bass is a qualified plumber and roofer. Previously, tibas were made of wood. He prefers working with sheet metal. There are no historical guidelines for the construction.
I use tin plate because it produces the best sound. When you process it, it retains a tension. That's what you need for the instrument. That's when it sounds best. And the more precisely you work, the better the tiba sounds.
Und je genauer dass man arbeitet, desto besser tönt zuletzt die tiba.
It takes him around 4 hours to construct an instrument. Its sound can be heard from a distance of 8 kilometers. Today's shepherds, however, use mobile phones to communicate. Marcel Bass mainly makes the tibas for musicians or enthusiasts like himself, people who enjoy the sound of the pipe reverberating through the mountain landscape.
You need to have a long breath to play the tiba. You can't play it for hours. It's normally just used briefly.
Man spielt kurz eigentlich die tiba.
Marcel Bass enjoys playing in Via Mala, a deep gorge in the Hinterrhein, the sides of which echo to the sound of the tiba. Especially in southern Switzerland, not just cows but also goats play an important role in alpine agriculture. They're affectionately named the pauper's cow and are well suited to the barren and steep terrain. The route leads towards Flims, where the posterior and the anterior Rhine flow together. In the Chingle mountain range, a natural hole gapes open, which is 15 meters in diameter. It was formed many millennia ago by rockfall and, depending on the sun's position, creates interesting light effects. The rock strata reveals a cross-section of the Earth's crust. 250 million-year-old Verrucano rock lies above 35 million-year-old limestone. The area is a popular climbing spot. As well as alpine and free climbers, a very different sport can occasionally be witnessed. On a slack rope, athletes perform a balancing act above a deep precipice.
You have to be able to judge how far you can go, what your limits are, and when you should stop. You have to be in tune with the mountain as well as with yourself. First, you have to be comfortable with yourself before you can walk across this thin rope.
Gian Sebregondi grew up in the mountains. First, Gian looks for a suitable place in the rock face where he can span the slackline. Of course, he prefers spectacular locations. But at the same time, he must be able to fix the rope with his drill as securely as possible. It all began 6 years ago, during a holiday when he spanned a rope while camping. Then it was only 80 centimetres off the ground. Today it's 200 metres.
The first step is very important, because you're still holding onto something or are standing on firm ground. And then you look for a fixed point and try to shut everything else out. And at some point you feel inside that it's the right time. And then you set off, your muscles taut, and you move.
Und dann setzt du an und die Muskulatur spannt sich und du bewegst dich.
He is only secured by a thin rope.
I think the best thing about slacklining is the inner calm you feel. There are hundreds of meters below you, so you have to concentrate really hard. And a few seconds here seem like an eternity.
Und ich glaube, es sind diese Sekunden, die so lange scheinen.
Balancing on a piece of rope has always been a circus act. But since climbing enthusiasts started trying it out themselves, it's also been brought to the mountains.
You need to use particular muscles on the back, which you of course first have to train, so that they can vibrate.
Dass sie diese Schwingungen ausbauen kann.
Being an enthusiastic climber, Gian is well prepared for walking over a 3-centimetre wide rope spanning a precipice.
There is no room for errors.
Es gibt keine Fehler.
You just can't make mistakes. I think that's also what makes it so exciting.
Reiz an der ganzen Sache ausstrahlt so.
You always have to have everything under control.
From Flims, the flight continues to Lake Zurich. halfway there is Lake Lucerne. Like fjords, its arms cut deep into the mountains. Glacial rivers wash away the sediments. Its location has made it one of the most famous and popular lakes of the Alps. It's only a short way over to Lake Zurich. At its northern tip sprawls the largest city in Switzerland, Zurich. Shaped by Ice Age glaciers, Lake Zurich today appears like the ideal combination of city and nature, man and mountains. Its water is drinkable. Performer and yodeling queen Erika Stuki couldn't imagine Zurich without the lake.
If you know a bit about yodeling and have heard African and Swedish forms, then you can hear that it is a mixture of a cheer and a bit of a Swiss element. But it also has a cowboy edge to it. And the Swiss? Different again are the Austrians, with their sporty, fast yodel. The Swiss yodel is sadder, more blues, more suicidal, heavier.
Erika Stuki loves transformation. She's chosen not to label her own art. Erika Stuki has Swiss ancestors. Her grandfather emigrated to America, and so did her parents. She was born in California and came back to Wallis as a young girl. Ever since, she's been at home in both worlds, the American and the Swiss. She also tries to combine elements from both cultures in her art, which is always unconventional, creative and daring.
As a 9-year-old, I arrived at Zurich airport and quickly had to learn that here in Switzerland, children don't talk when the adults do. You fold your arms in school and don't gesticulate wildly. You use a polite form of address when talking to teachers. I had to adapt quickly. In a way it was fun, but I also felt like my wings had been clipped.
Erika Stuki likes playing with stereotypes. She takes acoustic influences from different areas, jazz and country music, and adds traditional Swiss sounds. She also makes the props for her performances herself.
That's probably the essence of being a musician, keeping your ears open. When I hear a baby crying, I listen to it and ask myself, how does it do that with its tongue? Where does the sound come from? If you walk through the world with your ears open, then instead of souvenirs, you take sounds with you.